Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. I want to personally thank one of our listeners for sharing this story with us. This is his personal story. This video is long, so hopefully you have some time to devote to it. I have read many stories about infidelity, and there are some definite heartbreaking stories that sadden me to read them or hear about them. My story is also pretty sad, but I do not think that I am able to convey the same level of bitterness and betrayal that some of the other writers and submitters have experienced. My story, of course, is sad, but also perhaps gives a different perspective that might be worth listening to. I'm not sure why I am writing about events that took place so many years ago, but maybe it is just a way to show people that good things happen with time. And time and patience does seem to heal most things. I met my wife, and we were together for almost 10 years, which includes 7 years of marriage. We have 2 children who are now fully grown and have lives of their own. My wife and I met on a blind date, and it was awkward the entire night. My wife is an attractive woman with a vivacious personality. Me, on the other hand, am somewhat reserved and would not probably be considered as a head-turner. I am not that bad on the eyes, but do not in any way claim to be a great heartbreaker. I am also on the quiet side, and my wife has always been the person that people noticed at a party or an event. She also has a kind heart and is very empathetic to people and always looks for the good. Strangely enough, she seemed to like me and our relationship grew. Finally, we got married and began to build our life together. Our life was actually going very well. We had a nice home, good finances, supportive families, good friends, and our kids were doing well. But, as with many of these stories, there is a catalyst that can change everything. Our catalyst was a pregnancy. We had 2 young kids at the time and wanted to go for a 3rd child to have an even larger and happier family. We never had too many concerns in the bedroom, and we quickly had number 3 on the way. I was elated when my wife told me the news, and we waited about 3 months before we told the rest of our families about the new addition. During the next 3 months, we were busy with planning for the nursery, working with our kids on getting ready for the new baby, looking at finances. It is perhaps the saddest day of my life when my wife called me to tell me that something is wrong with the baby. We got her to the hospital, and unfortunately and tragically my wife had a miscarriage at the 6-month mark. We were both traumatized, and the trip back home next day was absolute silence and sadness. My wife went to bed that night and did not come out of that room for the next 3 days. She was absolutely overcome with sadness and depression. For some reason, she also believed that she had failed me as my wife. I told her again and again that this was an act of God. She did not do anything wrong and we could try again when the time was right. But she did not believe me and continued to blame herself for the whole situation and sunk into a depression. It took about 6 months, but she appeared to be coming out of her funk and seemed to be getting back to her normal self. We were both doing well with the kids. She seemed to have her personality back, and we were talking about the future. She also started to exercise and get back into shape. She really did look incredible, and I did enjoy giving her compliments and telling her how much I loved her. During this time, she also talked to me about getting a part-time job. It was not so much about the money, but more of a way for her to get out of the house and stay involved. I told her that was a great idea and encouraged her to think about what she wanted to do and to go for it. To my surprise, she got a job as a waitress and bartender at a restaurant right down the street from us. She has a degree in business, but did not want to get a white-collar job. She thought the hours and responsibilities would be too much with our home and family, but this would get her up and moving. She would be able to earn some money for herself. The hours would work well and feel like she was contributing. Plus, she said that she needed to work and talk with adults, and she felt this would get her out of her isolation at home. Once again, I told her that was great news and she should go for it. Now, I noted earlier that my wife is an attractive woman, but I should also add that she is a voluptuous woman and was looking really great with her level of fitness and weight loss. She has never had a problem with attracting interest from men, but she also has always been loyal to me, and I never had reason to doubt her. She started her job and was doing well. She worked 2-3 nights per week and usually worked on a Friday or one day on the weekend. I was somewhat uncomfortable with her work outfits because she wore clothing that accentuated her figure and showed more than I like to see. It was tasteful, but I admit that I wished she would be more conservative. She laughed at me on this and told me it was a great way to bring in more tips and perhaps her outfits would spur more romantic interest on my part. The owner of the restaurant was a good man and ran a good business. He was fair with his workers, and his family also all worked there. His son, to be honest, was somewhat of an arrogant jerk. He had been born into wealth and made no bones about living a nice lifestyle. He was about the same age as my wife, and I must admit he was a very good-looking guy. He was married but had no children yet. His wife is a lovely and wonderful person also. She also worked at the restaurant and handled the books. The son handled all the catering and special events. At least he was supposed to do that. My understanding is that he was somewhat lazy and constantly dumped his responsibilities off on his family and coworkers. What he really liked to do was lift weights, work out, drive around in his fancy car, mooch off his family, and basically talk and brag about how great he was with women. I'm not sure how his wife dealt with all of this. He was admittedly a flashy guy, but the guy did not impress me in the least. I could tell from the first time I met him that he was not much more than a big mouth windbag. My wife had commented to me several times that the guy was very good looking in an exciting way, but he was an arrogant toe rag and she could not stand him, but she had to work with him and kept her mouth shut to get along. She did work with him on a consistent basis, and they then began to have some type of friendship forming. I was not overly concerned, but did tell her that this guy was trouble, and she should be careful around him since I thought he was nothing but trouble. During the next several months, my wife did begin to act peculiar. She kept a close eye on her phone, claimed she had to work late, and began to be absent for long periods of time, claiming that she was shopping or running errands. She also began to ignore me to some extent, and I also thought she was not as attentive to the kids as she had been in the past. My wife is a good mother, but she seemed to be impatient at this time with the whole family and had no concern with turning over more of the responsibilities to me. It was a challenge since I also work full-time and am the primary breadwinner of the family. I did tell her of my concern, but she told me things were going okay, and I was seeing problems where there were not any. One night, my wife and I were alone and it was late. I made a move on her, and she shut me down cold. I asked her what the problem was, and with that, she started crying and shaking. I asked her again what the problem was and then received the shock of my life. My wife told she had been seeing the owner's son for almost 6 months. The relationship had turned sexual. She loved him, we were done, and she was going to leave me to move in with him. She also told me that she had been deeply unhappy since the miscarriage and felt that something in our marriage had died. She needed a fresh start, and she needed to be free to live her life. She also told me that she loved this guy, and he could make her happy. I was obviously pretty shook up and asked her to reconsider. She told me it was too late for that, and would be moving in with her new boyfriend into an apartment they had secured. I asked her about the kids, and she told me that it would be best if they stayed with me in the house to maintain a good home, and she would be there to see them. It is an understatement to say that I was absolutely shocked and flabbergasted at what had taken place. My wife told me that she did not understand the surprise since she thought I was well aware of her unhappiness with our marriage, and the miscarriage had been the final nail in the proverbial coffin. I was not pleased when I learned who she had a relationship with. It is one thing to get the complete shafting from your wife, and another to find out she was ditching you for a guy who was really a dirtbag. I do not want to make a generality, but there does seem to be some truth that so many women are attracted to guys like this. I am not sure if it was his looks, flashy lifestyle, his big stupid arrogant mouth, or maybe something else I did not like to think about, but she apparently was interested in him and it took off from there. I was very hurt when I found out later that it was my wife who put the moves on him and started the whole relationship. I was also shocked that she had been involved with him for almost 6 months without my knowing. They apparently had been having sex in his car, the restaurant, hotels, his house, our home when nobody was there. It was a real betrayal and I was deeply hurt, but I thought about what I would do and maintained my perspective and composure. What followed was basically several weeks of tears, sadness, cajoling, and really just a whole lot of crap. Being the lunatic engineer that I am, I spent an entire weekend putting together a matrix and chart of my different options and the consequences of each option. I then put together a numerical assessment of my options to come up with what I thought was the best plan. It was absolutely wacky and devoid of any normal human response. Strangely enough, thinking rationally and having a plan did show me what I saw as the best plan moving forward. My family, and especially my dad, was furious and began saying terrible things about her. My wife's side of the family was also upset with the situation, but obviously did not display the same level of animosity and bitterness that my side did. Her parents were fine to me, but they did make every effort to support and help their daughter, which I understood. But I then actually had to intervene with my father and ask him to stop with the vitriolic insults against my wife. She was still the mother of his son's children, and he needed to show her respect as a grandfather. My father actually agreed and commended me on my approach to this whole situation. I told him that I did not believe there was any benefit for me by seeking revenge on my soon-to-be ex-wife. She was the mother of my children, and I would need to have an amicable relationship with her for the sake of our kids. Do not get me wrong, I would have loved to be an SOB, but thought long and hard about it. I think that I made the correct choice and in retrospect would have done the same thing. As I said, it was a rough couple of weeks, but she did move out and into an apartment with this guy. She did see her children and try to be active in their lives. I also felt terrible for the wife of this guy, and she was mortified by what had taken place. She did leave the restaurant to get another job and did file for divorce. I would see her in the local grocery store on occasion and always wished her well. She was originally from Pennsylvania and eventually moved back to her home. I understand she did get remarried to a solid man and now has a good life and children. I wish her only the best. There is no question in my mind that her splitting with this guy is the best thing that ever happened to her. I did lose my temper one time, and it was due to that stupid phone my wife had. My wife never saw me get really upset. I kept my cool and she did not see this incident. We had gotten a flip phone. They were very new at that time and cost a bundle. We paid for that dumb phone, and at the time I did not even know how to use it. She told me that it was for safety and security, but the reality was she wanted it to her new chum. One time I heard it ringing right when she first told me she wanted out, and I tossed it on the floor when she left the room. The darn thing pretty much was destroyed and I tossed it out. I pled no knowledge of where it was. My wife looked for that dumb thing for 2 days and then decided she had lost it. The divorce itself went smoothly. She did get some money out of me due to the division of assets. I did agree to pay some alimony support for a short period of time, which I think ended at 1 year, or maybe it was 15, 18 months. To me, it was a cheap way to get out of the situation. In fact, I probably would have agreed to any financial demands she would have made in order to be done with the situation. I was retained as the primary custodial parent, and she had 50/50 visitation. I told her that she was always free to stop and see her children. She did do that on many occasions, and things appear to be somewhat stable. I also think she liked to see me when she came to visit the kids, but maybe that was wishful thinking on my part. My wife did not make a lot of money, but did make a small child support payment each month. To her credit, she did her best and never missed a payment when it came to her children. In retrospect, there is no doubt in my mind that my wife was going through some type of personal crisis due to the miscarriage and the aftermath of it. I am not some great prize, but there is no way my wife in her right mind would have done what she did. But I was powerless and there was not much I could do. The day we signed the divorce papers to make it final was surreal. Things had been amicable, but it was still tough. We met at her attorney's office and it was a sad affair for me. I was saddened that she seemed so happy about the situation and she was there with her dirtbag boyfriend. She almost seemed giddy about it, which really shocked me. We had been together for many years and had a family together. This was the only time I ever felt like she disrespected me during the whole divorce, but I let it roll off because there was nothing left to prove. The marriage was over, and we needed to move forward. When I signed the papers, I did see some regret in her eyes. I do think she had a look of shock on her face since I remember what I said to her. I had thought about it and had already decided what I was going to say. I must admit that I am proud of what I said and how well it came off. I am not an actor, but on this day, I did have a flair for the dramatic. I had written it down and practiced it until I had it down, and this is what I said, and I am of course sad about this. I thought we had a good life and we're a good team. First, I need to apologize to you if you think I failed you. I was not able to bring you the happiness you wanted. I must have really failed you if you thought somebody else would give you a better chance at happiness than I could. I think that I did my best, but that was obviously not enough. I do think the miscarriage had a lot more to do with this than we realize. When tragedies take place, people either get closer and stronger, or there is separation and loss. I am sad and find it ironic that what should have been a happy experience for us is what I believe destroyed us in the end. But that is in the past now. I want you to have a happy life, and we can work together to give our kids the best and most stable life we can. The room was quiet when I said this. Her face looked stark white, and I think that I did see regret in her eyes. With that, I got up, shook her hand, wished her well, said goodbye, and her attorney told me he would send me a copy of the papers. Things went okay at first. She was living with this guy, but within several months, chinks began to appear in their relationship. He apparently drank too much, was pretty much shiftless, lived off his family, and really was not much of a man. He also apparently had a wandering eye and was already lighting up his next conquest. She was apparently a younger girl who worked in another restaurant, which was also owned by his father. Of interest, and perhaps a little strange, is that I continued to order food from the original establishment. The owner would always greet me when I came in for my order, and always had a look of welcome and friendship on his face. The food was great, and I always liked the pizza and lasagna. No way I was giving that up, and I drew a line in the sand when it came to good takeout. I knew the owner for years, and I would drive past his house all the time and always waved at him. I also saw him at the grocery store, around town, school, and sporting events because he would come to watch his grandkids also. I did not hang out in the restaurant. I would simply phone in my order and go to the takeout window. I would never stay in the place because that would have been awkward. My ex-wife was working there and was living with his son. If you toss in that he deserted his wife also. The owner was not pleased. He was a family man and told me once that he did not understand where he went wrong with his son. Of course, and to no surprise, things began to go downhill with this new exciting power couple. My ex-wife one time had referred to themselves that way, and I admit that it really irritated me. The power couple were now fighting all of the time and things were not going well for my ex-wife. I think my ex-wife was seeing that perhaps I was not that bad of an option, and things are not always greener on the other side. With me, she had a solid man who put her and the kids first. I was a good husband, and perhaps she had made a really poor decision. She did call me several times to lament about her life, but I told her that I was not the person to talk with about this. She answered that I had been her best friend and she could always talk to me about anything. I told her that had been true, but things had changed and I did not feel comfortable being part of the discussion, and she needed to work things out on her own with her new partner. I did not want to be involved in her relationships and had no interest in hearing about her relationship with her new boyfriend. She did agree, but I think that I could sense some hurt and regret in her voice when she hung up after I told her this. One night she had the kids over at her apartment with her dirtbag boyfriend to have a sleepover and watch some movies. That evening I had an upset call from her. Apparently, this guy had drank too much and was frustrated that the kids did not want to watch one of his shows. I am not sure what the show was, but the kids apparently had no interest. So, he got mad and slapped my youngest daughter because he thought she was being snotty. This was a hard slap and left a mark on her cheek. So, I get a call and went right over there. My first inclination was to call the cops, and maybe I should have, but I did go over there to get my kids. I should not laugh, but what I did to him still makes me smile. The guy was very good looking and was very fit. However, he was not a large man by anybody's standard. I should note that I am a large and strong man with years of military experience and knew how to take care of myself. So, I took him by the neck with my left hand and grabbed his right hand. I then proceeded to work him over pretty good with his own hand while telling him at the same time, "Hey, why are you hitting yourself?" My older brother had done this to me many a time when I was a kid. I had also seen this done in the military one time, and that is where I got the idea. I think it was a fitting way to address the situation. It was very humiliating for him. I then took my kids and left. I told him that if I heard anything else from him about this, my next call would be to the cops and then he would have real trouble. That is the last thing I wanted to do, since that would have also caused problems for my ex-wife and me, since she was really in no position to deal with more trouble. I do admit that I got some real pleasure out of telling my ex-wife off with a very snide comment, "And so this is what you left me for?" She did not say anything, but did hang her head. I think she was ashamed of what had taken place. I am not sure if that meant she regretted the divorce, but I do think she realized what she had done and was regretful. Lo and behold, later that night, I get a knock at the door and there she is sobbing and was very upset. I did let her come in, and she told me that she had broken up with her boyfriend and wanted to come home. Now, I thought long and hard for several minutes and told her that I loved her. We had history, but I would not be a backup since her relationship failed and I could not go back. With everything that had taken place, I did not think it was a good idea for her to come back, and there were just too many sad memories. That being said, I would never have left the mother of my children alone on the street. She did come in, and she did call her parents. I took her there to stay. My former father-in-law met me at the door and thanked me. He told me that I had been a good man and a good husband. He appreciated that I had put the kids first and did look after the safety of his daughter as my ex-wife. I did tell him that I would always love his daughter. Maybe things did not go the way we wanted, but I would not let harm come to her. To this day, I am proud of what I did on this night and what I decided to do to protect my kids. And in the end, my ex-wife, she lived at her parents' house for about a year until she could get back on her feet. She did get a good job in meeting and event planning, actually with my help and contacts, and moved into her own place. It was to my kids' benefit that she had a solid and stable job. I have to admit, though, that I was very jealous at times of her new condo since she had access to a really nice swimming pool. It was minutes from my house, and my kids spent many a hot afternoon at her place and in that pool. She was always a good mother, and her old vitality and spark returned. It was not perfect, but there was some sense of normalcy. She did have a string of relationships that did not go anywhere, and I think she was taken advantage of several times. For some reason, she had a propensity for guys who were good-looking, but were dirtbags. I never understood the attraction to the bad boy, and my ex-wife was a case study in why these guys seem to be losers. She always seemed to be dealing with loaning money to these guys, being part of a love triangle, and are just generally dealing with a lot of bad situations. Several times she would say to me that I was the best relationship she ever had and nobody else could compare. Maybe that was a lot of cheap talk, but I did like to hear it. I did upset her one time when she said to me that I was her greatest relationship and she made a mistake to let it go. I think she was trying to be sincere and wanted to see if there was a chance for her and me to get back together again. She was then seriously infuriated when I told her that maybe if I would have been more of a dirtbag, mistreated her, cheated on her, abused her, and generally took advantage of her, she would not have run off with another man. I told her that she almost seemed to enjoy being somebody's doormat, spittoon, piggy bank, crutch, and armchair. She did not speak to me for almost a month after that, but I admit that I enjoyed it and the impact it had on her. After a month, we did talk again as before and she laughed about the situation. She told me that unfortunately what I said about her taste in men, besides myself, seemed to be sadly true. All that being said, nothing romantic happened again between us and I retained a cordial and respectful relationship with her. I believe that I could have been with her again if I wanted, but would not take that step even though she did drop hints and suggestions on a consistent basis. In my heart, I wanted to, but was basically scared of being hurt again. I did date a number of women and do not claim to have lived my life as a monk after my divorce. I did fine, but was busy with work and my kids. Also at that time, most of the single women my age, 30 plus at that time, were also divorced with kids and had family drama of their own. I had a couple of experiences at that time with dating and divorced women that I think justified my approach. I was not going to bring women home to the house with my kids there if I was not serious about the person. I dated some really nice and attractive women, but I did not want to go to the next level. Several of them wanted more from me, but I was not going to go there. I was focused on work, my kids, and had really no interest in another marriage or a long-term relationship. Maybe I was being selfish, but I just did not want to deal with it. So, I never got too serious even when I had the chance to. Several of them accused me of playing a game and leading them on, but I was always upfront with them. I would be lying if I said that my past feelings for my ex-wife did not have some impact. I just did not want to take that step for something more serious. I felt that I had already went down that path and got hosed. So, why do it again? It is so different nowadays. I wish back then I could have gone on a website, posted my photo, and swiped to find somebody interested. It was a different time. Maybe not better, but was just different in regard to relationships. The bottom line for me was, there were just too many bad memories, and I decided that going solo was the best route for me. What was satisfying for me, though, is that my ex-wife would routinely ask my kids for an update if she thought I was dating somebody. They really could not tell her anything since I did not bring any of these ladies around the house for the reasons noted above. She would get frustrated and several times asked me for an update. I would change the subject to her great frustration and end the discussion with a chuckle and a comment. I'm doing fine from the romance perspective and have no issues or complaints with my personal life. One night, I had a date with a very attractive and fit woman that had been a setup organized by a wife of a friend. We were sitting in a restaurant enjoying the date. Then, in comes my ex-wife with several of her girlfriends. We did not see each other right away because I am sure she would have walked right out if she did. She went to the restroom and then saw me at a table. I was very pleased to be sitting with such an attractive woman, and I could tell that it shocked and upset my ex-wife. Soon after she saw me, I did see her and her friends get up and leave the restaurant. The next day, I got a call from her asking for information on who I was out with. She did comment on my date's beauty, fitness, and that I must be proud of myself since I had obviously moved on to something better. My answer once again was the same as before. I'm doing fine from the romance perspective and have no issues or complaints with my personal life. Maybe I was being petty, but I felt great about this situation for days after. I should note that one of the most impactful situations for us took place when I was recalled back to active duty to serve in Iraq in 2004 to 2005. I of course was not happy with the recall since I had served my time on active duty and spent another 18 years in the reserve. I thought I was through with my service time, was getting to retire from the reserve, but I had made my commitment and had to meet my obligations. My ex-wife was very scared for me at the time. I had also been recalled back to active duty for the first Gulf War, and she was well aware of what I would be up against. She tried to talk to me about our past relationship before I left and potentially getting together again, but I just did not need to deal with that kind of drama. I did tell her that I was happy she was there, she was back to normal, and I knew that she would take good care of the kids with help from both sets of grandparents. During my deployment, my ex-wife probably had written to me a dozen times and had sent me several packages. At the time, I could not deal with the drama, and I had to keep my mind straight. There had also been a group picture of my unit in a news magazine, and I was in the photo also. It was rough living, and I did not look like the epitome of cleanliness and health in the photo. Apparently, this photo greatly moved her when she saw it, and was very scared for me. Obviously, it was a tough time for me also, but I just did not have the time or desire to deal with issues that would distract me. As a result, and perhaps a sense of petty payback, I never opened or read one single letter from her. I tossed all her letters in the packages right into the trash, and kept all thoughts about her out of my mind. I did write my kids on a regular basis, and they wrote to me. Several of their letters addressed the hurt my ex-wife was feeling due to my non-response, but there was no way I wanted that kind of drama in my life at that time. As a result, I never wrote her back. When I came home, after just around a year, I did see my ex-wife at a family welcome home event. I was really chagrined my parents invited her, but I went with the flow. She had learned about the event and asked them if she could come. The reality, though, is that my love for her had never died, and seeing her was always painful for me. I had a hard time getting past what had happened before, and the bottom line is, I was just afraid. So, during the event, she pulled me to the side and told me that she was very hurt and surprised that I never wrote her back, or at least sent her a note thanking her for the cookies and cake that she sent me. I told her straight out that I never read anything she sent me, and I tossed the packages she sent without opening them. I told her we had been through for years. I did not ask her to write me. The whole situation was still sad and raw for me, and I did not need to have any drama, and especially her, in my life. I then told her that she knew we needed to work together for our kids. I would be civil to her, would look to make sure she had help with our kids, and make sure she and the kids were protected. But I didn't lie when I told her that I had no interest in any relationship with her outside of our kids. I noted earlier that she looked regretful when I signed the divorce paperwork, but I think what I told her on this day completely stunned her. She told me later that this moment really shook her. Her ex-husband was deployed to a very dangerous place. People were literally fighting for their lives. He did not want to hear from her, and could not be bothered to even look at what she sent. She told me that this really shook her, was deeply hurtful, cut her deep to the core, and made her really think about the long-term impact and consequences of what happened. Looking back, I am very ashamed of how I handled this situation. I wrote back to anybody who sent me something, but I could not reciprocate to my ex-wife. It is not one of my greatest moments, and I am not proud of what I did. I told my ex-wife this soon after the initial discussion, and noted that I felt great shame for how I acted to her. The truth, which I did not tell her, is that I did not respond, because I still loved her and was afraid because of what had happened before. All that being said, we did have a good working relationship. Things are never perfect, and we are not perfect people. We did work well together to raise our kids, and we were a very good team when it came to our kids. She was at the house so often to see her kids that I almost felt like telling her that she should move in. I do think that if I had suggested it, she would have moved in right away. When my daughters hit their teenage years, she was an integral part of their lives. I did my best, but I think a mother can handle some situations better than a father. She dealt with my daughters on breakups with boyfriends, crushes, womanly issues. My ex-wife did a masterful job in handling these issues and situations with empathy, patience, and pure motherly love. She was always there for them. My admiration did grow for her when I saw how skilled she was in helping the kids make the right choices. One of my daughters at one time got involved with somebody who I thought was a proverbial dirtbag. I am not sure what happened, but my wife talked to her. Apparently, she told my daughter of her own choices and the impact from them. The good news is that the dirtbag was quickly jettisoned, and I breathed a sigh of relief. To this day, I really regret that we were not together as a family during this time. I just did not have the courage and fortitude to give our relationship a shot. So many of the Reddit stories seem to push for ongoing and eternal revenge and payback. I just do not think that does anything positive for anybody in the long run. My wife had apologized to me many times and made overtures on getting back together over the years. One time she tearfully asked me how many times she would have to atone and keep paying for her mistakes, and that she had now been paying the price for over 20 years. But I must be honest and admit that it was simply my personal fear, pride, and need for petty payback that did not allow me to take that step forward. I should have just faced the fact that she is not perfect. I am not perfect and she made a bad mistake, but I did not have the guts to give it another shot. I was just too afraid to do so. The years did fly by. My kids did well, attended college, had good careers, got married, and started families. I would still see my ex-wife at family events on a regular basis. She would always ask me if I was seeing anybody, and it would always come around the hints, asking if there was still a chance for us to get back together. I always told her no, because in life some things stick and you cannot go away from them. She would always look sad and told me that her decision to leave me was the worst decision and mistake she ever made. She told me there is not a day that goes by when she does not think about what if. I would be lying if I said that I did not have similar feelings, but I was too scared to tell her or give it a chance and see what would happen. She also told me it was especially hard for her at events like weddings, birthday parties, and other family events. She told me that the toughest days for her from this perspective was at the funerals for her mother and father when they died. She was happy when she saw me there, but greatly saddened since I was not there as her husband and partner to support her at such a difficult moment of her life. She knew that I was a strong man and good husband to her, but on these days she felt alone and had felt great regret. Of interest is that I talked to my father-in-law shortly before he died at a family-related event for his grandchildren. Despite everything that had happened, I always had a strong relationship with my former in-laws. The talk was interesting. He told me that he knew from the way that I looked at his daughter that my love for her had never died. His wife had passed away, but told me that they had been a complete team and always would be. He told me that maybe I should forget the past and see where things could go in the future. He did chuckle a little when he told me that what in the hell did you really have to lose? I really like that man and miss him to this day. My wife also told me she really felt this way. Regret, sadness, and what if at the weddings for both of our children and the birth of our grandchildren? She thought there would have been great days that we should have shared together. She asked me if I ever felt the same way. My answer had always been evasive and that the divorce experience was sad for me, but I decided to move forward and not look back. I did tell her that I felt her regret was ironic, since she was so sure that true happiness was with her new boyfriend, and they were such an exciting power couple. She never liked to hear that, and would get upset if I mentioned it to her. Recently, I had an experience with a coworker. I was surprised to learn that my situation was not as rare as I thought it was. A guy I worked with had a similar experience, but he was the cheater. It dealt with the death of his son in an auto accident. He could not handle it. A part of him died with his son. He could not come back from it and started blaming his wife. I could not understand it, but he somehow put his grief on his wife. Then he got into this something is missing in my life approach and took up with another woman. I could not understand that one either. He gave up his wife of 20-plus years for a person he had met for one night on a business trip. He also made a bad move as he got divorced, remarried, and divorced again in less than 5 years. I had lunch with him one day and I was shocked when he told me that he is dating his first ex-wife again. They have such history and chemistry. She had forgiven him, and it was going great. Then I was even more shocked to learn they had remarried through a destination wedding with their families and were back together again. One thing I have learned is that some people have a very hard time when dealing with really traumatic situations. Instead of facing it, they try to block it by thinking they can hide from it. I believe that this is exactly what happened with my ex-wife. I admit that this situation with my work colleague really caused me to take a step back and really think about my life and the relationship with my ex-wife. We are both now pushing past 60 and I was thinking about hanging it up at work, doing some consulting on the side and moving somewhere warm or at least for the cold months. Between part-time work, my consulting jobs, savings, 401k, future work pension, military reserve pension, future social security, and some inheritance, I am doing or will be doing pretty darn well. My kids honor and support me and do love their mother. The last time I talked to my ex-wife before moving was at a birthday party for one of our grandchildren. She asked to speak to me alone, and we stepped outside. She then became very emotional and upset, perhaps more upset than I had ever seen her before. She sobbed and then told me she always thought there was a chance that we would get back together. My moving away would signify the absolute end, and that she had experienced a lifetime of regret for having failed as a wife. I told her so many years had gone past, and that she should not feel that way. I have nothing but respect and admiration for her. I told her she faced some tough times, but had really rebuilt her life. She was a great mother, a wonderful grandmother, had a great career, and had been a great friend to many people including me. She should not dwell on one issue that had taken place so many years before. I had long ago let it go and suggested that she needed to do the same. She then continued to cry and ask if I really thought it was possible to let such a huge mistake go by, and she was very sorry for her betrayal of me and the impact on our family. She told me that she still did not fully understand why she did what she did and thought about it all the time. She did not recognize that person from so many years ago. I know it sounds like a dramatic television moment, but it was even deeper to me when it happened. She composed herself, took my hands, looked me in the eyes, and asked if she could potentially come visit me. I told her that I did not know, but would think about it. I admit that every single time I looked into her beautiful green eyes, my heart would always melt. Today was no exception. On this day, she looked exceptionally beautiful to me, and the years have been very kind to her. On this day, I must admit that regardless of what had taken place before, I never felt more intense love for her than I did. On this day, at this moment in time, perhaps it does not make sense, but the heart feels what it feels, and time for me seemed to have stopped, and we were back to when we had just met. She then really kissed me in a romantic manner for the first time in almost 30 years. I would be lying if I did not admit that I wanted her back in my life, more than anything at that moment. I somehow maintained my cool. I told her that I would need to think about the whole situation and what I needed to do. The whole conversation and situation resonated in my head, and I thought about it again and again. At this point in my life, I thought that maybe I would welcome having a relationship with her again. I would not get remarried, but what did I really have to lose at this point? The words and insight of my past father-in-law did continue to ring in my head. She did make me happy at one time, and my love for her had never went away. At this point of time in our lives, maybe we can go forward. So, I am semi-retired, rent my house to my youngest daughter for next to nothing in maintenance, and have been living in the Carolinas. COVID is interesting, since it allowed me to move away, but still work for the company out of the house on a part-time basis. I am doing some consulting on the side and will start drawing my work pensions soon. Basically, I am sitting pretty. So, I really thought about it, and my ex-wife did come to see me after I told her that I would like for her to come down and visit. Crazy, I know, but all that old feelings are still there. She stayed at my place, and we went and did many things together. I am pleased to report that since we are older, but learned that we still do well together with what I call that special time. She was there for a weekend, but it stretched into 2 weeks and then into over a month. I never said it, but I did not want her to leave. I felt like it was meant to be. One night, as her time to go back home was getting close, she started to cry and sob because of what happened literally years ago. She told me that the past several weeks had brought her great happiness, and she was so sorry for what happened. She told me that she constantly thought about what if, and if she had wasted her life for some type of utopian relationship that cannot exist. I thought about it and decided, right at that moment, that it was time for me to forget the past, step up, and make the move I had thought about for years. I then told her that was all in the past, and maybe the time had come for us to move on and reconsider having a future together. I then reached down, put aside my fear, and finally found my courage. I told her the real absolute truth is that I always loved her. My feelings for her had never died. My love for her was even stronger, and maybe she would like to be with me permanently. She had a look of shock on her face when I said this. She took my hands and asked if I was indeed serious, or if this was just a spur-of-the-moment decision. I told her it was indeed made as a spur-of-the-moment decision, but I had thought about this for a long time, for years even, and I was serious. I told her that if she stayed, I would never let her out of my life again. I told her that I was not sure about marriage again, but did it really make a difference at this point in our lives? She agreed. She never left my home, and things have been going great. The kids had a look of absolute shock on their faces when we told them over a virtual phone call. I never thought I would be talking about my personal life over a virtual phone call, but they were very happy for us. My youngest daughter, though, told me she was not really surprised because she knew that my love for her mother had never died, and she had a feeling that things were not truly over. The current status is that things are still going very well, and we have no complaints. I am not claiming perfection, but we are doing well as a couple and are very happy. I think the biggest issue we run into is my wife continues to lament about her choices from almost 30 years ago. I told her the past is the past at this point, and I really do not want to relive what happened in 1997. 1998, we have had a great family, ran into some problems, but things are going well now, but she still feels that she has to continue proving herself to me, and I told her that is no longer important. She knows of my love for her. She needs to forget the past, and we need to look to the future. She also wants to show me that she has total transparency. I told her that I have zero interest in checking her phone, social media. She is into social media, but social media to me is a crock and I could care less about it. I trust her and will not hold a situation from almost 30 years ago against her at this point. She understands, but for some reason still feels she must prove herself. It is not a big deal, but does come up on a semi-regular basis. That situation, though, is also getting better as time goes on, and she is more secure in our relationship. One recent thing happened that did really surprise me. My wife came to me and told me she needed to tell me something that I did not know, but she wanted to move forward with complete honesty. I was like, okay, now what? But she was embarrassed and ashamed to tell me then that she had actually been married for a short period of time to the dirtbag boyfriend. They went to Vegas after our divorce to have a quick and somewhat secret wedding. I did not know. Her parents did not know at the time, and to this day, Our kids do not know. However, the marriage to no surprise quickly imploded due to his drinking, scumbag behavior, and then culminated with the slapping incident at the apartment. That is when she realized she needed to get out. My wife was quite surprised at my reaction when she told me she thought that I would be upset and hurt, but instead I began to chuckle, laugh, poured a nice cold beer, and went to get our pizza that had been baking in the oven. I told her it had been so many years ago, and I found the whole situation to be pretty much bizarre, ludicrous, and humorous at this point. She was surprised at my basic reaction of who really freaking cares at this point. I did tell her that I could never understand why such a smart lady got so involved with a guy who could only be described as a pretty clown. Then we had another strange anomaly take place several weeks after the discussion on the secret quick wedding in Las Vegas. We ran into the first wife of the pretty clown down along the beach. She was there on vacation with her husband, now adult children, and her grandchildren. I cannot say she was overly pleased to see my ex-wife, but was happy to see me, and we did talk for a period of time. My ex-wife had not seen or talked to her pretty clown ex-husband in many years. She did know that he moved to Las Vegas himself, had opened several eateries, but that was about all. The short story is that he had done well in the restaurant business despite his idiocy, but he was now basically drinking himself to death. Nobody could do anything to help him, and he did not have much longer. He also apparently had a string of marriages to younger women who divorced him after relatively short periods of time, took him for a lot of his money, and he was basically going to die broke and alone. It sounded like a pretty grim story. My ex-wife, now back with me as my partner, tried to hide her sadness, but I could tell she was upset about this. I showed some empathy and told her it is natural to feel sadness for somebody you cared for. We kept an eye on the obituaries, since his last name was unique and knew he did not have long. My ex-wife, now partner, and I talked. She did write him a letter to what she thought was his address, but never heard back from him. He then died about 6 weeks after we had talked to his first ex-wife. His obituary notice posted by the funeral home sounded sad. It basically read that he was successful in business, but there was no mention of children or any type of family. There was a picture of him from his later years, and I was shocked when I saw the toll his poor life choices had taken on him. He had been a very handsome man in his youth, but many years of booze and abuse had eaten him to the bone. He was a shell, at best, of the person I remembered. I knew that his parents were long dead, and later learned he was estranged from his family altogether. He was cremated. No family came out, there was no memorial service, and that was that. It was a pretty sad story since he died alone. He traveled a rough road, and I am thankful that I did not go down that path. However, I did slip up here and admit to talking out of both sides of my mouth on letting go of the past, in this instance, at least. I had consistently told my wife the past did not matter anymore. That was almost always true for me, but this situation caused me to relive some bad memories. This was the last time that I ever did something to my ex-wife from the perspective of revenge and petty payback. After learning all this about the pretty clown, I could not resist, and did tell her, wow. Do you see what you could have had if you stayed with him? A lifetime of his abuse, drinking, and womanizing. What a great decision you made to leave me, divorce, and marry him. She was shook up at what I said, and was deeply hurt. I immediately knew what I did was wrong, and apologized to her. I told her I was wrong to bring this up to hurt her, and use it as a weapon. I promised her then and there that I would never use the past again like this in a hurtful manner, and I have kept that promise. I should note the movie night slapping incident is also probably the one thing that really upsets my wife. We can discuss other things rationally, but this incident causes her to get very upset and almost hysterical. It has been so many years, but she has a hard time accepting that this guy hit her daughter, and she could not stop him. I mentioned the incident early on when she originally came down to see me. It was an entire night of crying, shaking, and apologies. Obviously, this is not something I want to experience again, so I personally have not mentioned it again, and have no interest in doing so ever again. After all this recent drama, and in the end, we did recently get remarried in a small chapel with our family there to witness the ceremony. At this point, we did not see any value in a legal marriage, but it was important to both of us that our relationship be renewed in the eyes of God. Perhaps an outmoded sentiment, but one that I think is important. I did think a lot about that day and our vows from so many years before. What God has put together, let no man put asunder. Perhaps we had always been meant to be together, and this was just a resumption of what had always been meant to be. I do believe in free will, but I do believe that some things maybe are also just meant to be. Some people reading this may think I am crazy for doing this again after so many years, but at this point in our lives, there is only love and respect. What happened so many years ago is in the past. Now, when I see my wife, And I must admit to myself that I always considered her to be my wife. I only feel love and affection. I think things will get even better, and hopefully we will have good years ahead. As we head into old age, she really made a bad decision so many years ago, but that is in the past. I think we both face the consequences, but I look forward to life and moving forward. Perhaps it is hokey, but one thing is important to me. I always thought we were writing a book together, but was saddened that we would never get a chance to finish it. I am pleased that we now have another chance to finish writing that book, and including the final chapters. Many people have asked if I ever went for counseling or therapy. The answer is a resounding no. I know some people benefit from counseling and therapy, but it is not for me. Some people told me this was a mistake, but I disagree. I believe that I am a strong man and did not believe that this would benefit me in addressing this situation. I did not cheat and always maintained my moral compass. Perhaps it was a mistake, but I have come a long way without that kind of assistance. I do think about it though and wonder if effective counseling would have encouraged me to make a move earlier, but that is something that we will never know. My wife did go for counseling numerous times to figure out what she called her hidden issues. I admit to not understanding the whole aspect of counseling and do not need somebody to tell me how I feel or help me figure out the rationale for decisions that I made. I know why I did what I did. I may not always be proud of my decisions, but I know why I made them and what drove them. My wife told me after many counseling visits that to this day, she still does not fully understand why she did what she did. She basically thinks the miscarriage and the depression caused her to make short-term decisions without considering the long-term consequences. I already knew that in my mind 30 years ago, but do support my wife in trying to move herself forward. I admit that when we talk about these kinds of issues, I always try to look attentive and be supportive, but the reality is in the back of my mind. I am trying to figure out who will be in my starting lineup for fantasy football. All that being said, let me point out again that I love my wife with passion. I always put my family first and I am thankful to have her back in my life. We are not perfect, but we are now, as my reinstated deceased father-in-law calls it, a complete team. And I think we always will be. Would my wife cheat again? I do not think she would at this stage of our lives, but age, maturity, and experience has shown me that all people are mixed bag. There is good and bad in all of us, and one action or decision does not make or break a person. I have regrets also. My regret is that I always loved my wife, and I let sad feelings dictate what I decided to do. Maybe I should have just recognized the fact that she is a human being and made a bad decision. Perhaps I should have given this a shot earlier, and things might have been better. I do think about what if also, but I'm glad we have this second chance. With that, let me conclude, and hopefully I have a different perspective that some of you will be able to consider. If this story left you stunned, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more gripping tales and life lessons. Join our community and never miss a moment of these dramatic twists. Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. I am a 40-year-old man, and my wife, Miley, is 38 years old. We tied the knot 5 years ago, but our love story began at the wedding of my friend Noah. On that special day, I attended as a groomsman, while Miley took part as one of the bridesmaids. It was during the ceremony that Miley's captivating confidence caught my attention as she gracefully donned a beautiful green maxi dress. As I gazed at her, my attention completely consumed. I clumsily spilled cocktails all over myself. It was a comical moment that caught Miley's eye, and we burst into uncontrollable laughter together. Amidst the laughter, she kindly offered her assistance, helping me clean the mess from my shirt. It was evident to her that I was attracted to her, but my hesitance prevented me from making a move. However, Miley, with her laid-back demeanor and stunning appearance, took the initiative and struck up a conversation with me. Her charm and beauty were simply irresistible. While I had always been skeptical about love at first sight, meeting Miley shattered my doubts. From the moment our eyes met, I knew she was the one for me. As our relationship blossomed after Noah's wedding, Miley extended an invitation for me to meet her parents. It was during this time that our commitment deepened, and we realized we wanted to spend our lives together. However, our journey faced a hurdle when Miley's father expressed his concerns about our relationship. He held a strong desire for his daughter to marry a wealthy businessman, which posed a challenge for our union. During my visit to their home, I was taken aback when Miley's father had the audacity to belittle me, referring to me as an average man. He went on to insult my financial standing, expressing his disapproval of his daughter marrying someone who he deemed to be earning insufficient income. It was a hurtful moment as he compared my modest earnings to Miley's remarkable beauty, likening her to a Hollywood actress. Despite the fact that I held the position of a brand manager at a reputable marketing agency and was earning a respectable income, his shallow and demeaning remarks provoked my outrage. In response, I firmly stood my ground. expressing my disappointment and reminding him that true worth extends far beyond material wealth. Due to the man's overwhelming narcissism, Miley adeptly handled the situation, demonstrating her loyalty by standing by my side and confronting her father. With her unwavering support, Miley chose to leave her parents' house and embark on a new chapter with me. Merely a week later, we organized an intimate ceremony to celebrate our union and exchanged vows, bringing us great joy. Having such an understanding and encouraging partner as my wife filled me with immense happiness, particularly as Miley deliberately chose to invite her mother alone, omitting her father from the guest list. Our initial year of marriage overflowed with bliss and contentment. Nevertheless, as our journey progressed, I began to observe certain traits in Miley that mirrored those of her father. Growing up, her parents had showered her with abundant love, leading to a sense of entitlement within her. She frequently insisted on being treated like royalty, expecting unwavering obedience to her desires. Any disagreement I expressed was promptly dismissed as a mere dispute, as she held an expectation for me to comply with her every demand without hesitation or inquiry. During our furniture shopping for our home, I found that Miley had little regard for my opinions. My suggestions were consistently overlooked, and when I expressed my preference for white sofas over the green ones, she blew the situation out of proportion. Her tendency to become upset and throw tantrums over seemingly trivial matters became evident. On one occasion, I mistakenly purchased chocolate ice cream instead of her beloved blueberry flavor, which led Miley to burst into uncontrollable tears. It became apparent that she was unaccustomed to hearing the word no in her life. With no job or career, she dedicated the majority of her time to socializing with friends and indulging in shopping expeditions. I came to the realization that Miley had inherited her father's traits, but I was not prepared to surrender or blindly comply with her demands. I made it clear that as a married couple, I had the right to express my opinions, and I expected her to exhibit maturity if we were to build a successful marriage. I conveyed that without mutual understanding and respect, our marriage would be untenable. Miley was taken aback by my assertion, since she had never encountered the word no before. Overwhelmed with emotion, she sobbed and sincerely pledged to modify her behavior. Although it was an unfamiliar experience for her, she was determined to make an earnest effort because she professed a deep love for me. Recognizing that her father bore responsibility for her spoiled demeanor, I chose to grant her an opportunity for growth, driven by my own love for her. Miley began taking gradual steps to demonstrate her commitment to patience and kindness towards me. She secured a part-time job and enrolled in a course, showcasing her willingness to take responsibility and contribute to our lives. Rather than spending her days socializing with friends, she made the effort to accompany me when we met our mutual friends, Noah and his wife, Emily. While Emily had been Miley's childhood friend, she starkly contrasted with her in terms of personality and demeanor. Miley's childhood friend, Emily, presented herself as a composed, mature, and intelligent woman, providing a stark contrast to Miley's previous behavior. As Noah was my closest friend, we frequently engaged in collaborative efforts, working on various business ideas together. This led to frequent visits between our households. Through our unwavering dedication and hard work, Noah and I successfully launched our product, which translated into substantial financial gains. As a result, we transitioned from residing in cramped apartments to spacious, comfortable houses, marking a significant improvement in our living conditions. Upon hearing about my accomplishments, my father-in-law's perception of me began to soften, prompting him to initiate casual phone conversations. Initially, I harbored reluctance to engage with him, but with encouragement from Emily and Noah, who desired for me to let go of the past and extend forgiveness, I decided to answer his calls. Eventually, I embraced the idea and extended an invitation to my in-laws, welcoming them to our new home. When my father-in-law accepted the invitation and visited our opulent abode, he was taken aback by the extent of our newfound prosperity, as he had never anticipated my success. It was his own ill treatment and misbehavior that fueled my desire for wealth, serving as the impetus for me to tirelessly work day and night to achieve my goals. However, he persisted in pressuring both Miley and me to start a family, despite our reservations and personal preferences. Ironically, the man who initially opposed his daughter's union with me now expressed a sudden desire for us to have children. Recognizing his tendency to intrude in our lives, I maintained a reasonable distance from him. However, last year during Christmas, Miley's parents insisted that we host a grand dinner at our home, urging us to include a wide range of guests. In response, I extended invitations to Noah and his family, as well as my own parents and brothers, fostering an atmosphere of togetherness and celebration. Miley's parents insisted that I extend invitations to their friends and relatives for the Christmas dinner, citing their absence at our wedding as the reason. It became evident that their motivation was not solely to introduce their son-in-law to their acquaintances, but rather to showcase their connections and display our lavish house and wealth. Despite their desires, I declined to invite a large number of people, choosing instead to maintain a more intimate gathering. Nonetheless, Miley did invite a select few of her parents' friends and relatives to the dinner. During the Christmas dinner party, my parents and Noah's family arrived dressed in casual yet appropriate attire for the occasion. However, I was taken aback when Miley's family appeared in overly formal and extravagant attire, as if they were attending a wedding rather than a casual gathering. To my surprise, friends and relatives of my in-laws began to act as if they were in their own home, dancing and utilizing our space without restraint. Miley had chosen to wear a short black dress, and the lively atmosphere had transformed our home into a bustling party scene, resembling more of a bar than a traditional Christmas dinner. This stark contrast to our usual quiet and simple family gatherings left me feeling uneasy. Observing the turn of events, my parents, who preferred a more tranquil atmosphere, made the decision to depart early, sensing that the gathering had evolved into something more akin to a disco than a traditional Christmas celebration. As the evening progressed, my father-in-law busily showcased our house, cars, and various possessions to his friends, while their children joined Miley on the dance floor. Meanwhile, Noah's family and I remained focused on enjoying our dinner and paid little attention to these unfamiliar guests. After our meal, Noah and Emily decided to leave early, having fulfilled their obligations for the evening. Feeling deeply dissatisfied with the party's turn of events, I expressed my frustration to Miley, emphasizing the need to bring the gathering to a close. Understanding my sentiments, Miley reassured me that she would take charge and asked me to retreat upstairs for some rest. Battling a pounding headache and growing anger towards Miley and her parents' eccentric friends, I locked myself in my room and sought solace in sleep. Awakening around 3 a.m. from a disturbing dream, I noticed Miley's absence beside me. Curiosity piqued, I decided to descend the stairs to investigate. To my astonishment and growing anger, I found the entire house shrouded in darkness, devoid of any illumination. The unsettling revelation awaited me as I discovered the lingering presence of the previous guests, who were now leisurely lounging on the carpets and sofas, seemingly undeterred by the late hour. Furious at this discovery, my frustration mounted further. Unable to locate Miley or her parents in the main living areas, I expanded my search to other rooms within the house. Eventually, I discovered her parents fast asleep in our designated guest room. Growing more concerned, I decided to call Miley's phone in an attempt to determine her whereabouts. As the ringtone echoed from within the house, I realized that the sound was emanating from another guest room. Sensing something amiss, I swiftly disconnected the call and cautiously entered the room to investigate. As I opened the door, a wave of shock washed over me when I found Miley alone in the room with an unfamiliar man, engaging in a highly inappropriate situation. Overwhelmed with anger and disbelief, I instinctively reached for my phone, capturing video evidence of the scene before me. In a fit of rage, I confronted Miley, dousing her with water, causing her to be taken aback by my sudden presence, as she had assumed I would be asleep and unaware until the morning. I punched the guy and threw him out of my house after yelling and making a scene. When Miley's parents and other guests woke up from my shouting, Miley's father explained that it was all a misunderstanding and that the man was his friend's kid. I told him to shut up. When Miley cried and begged me to give her another chance, I slapped her. However, her father persisted in offering feeble explanations, downplaying the severity of the situation and insinuating that I was overreacting. His entitled demeanor became increasingly apparent now that I had attained wealth, as he seemed appalled at the mere thought of me leaving his daughter. He proposed that, as a family matter, we should address it in the morning, sparing our guests the spectacle of a public confrontation. Reaching my breaking point, I no longer had any concern for the guests or my unfaithful wife. Therefore, I decisively ushered them all out of my house, even though it was the dead of night. Subsequently, I took the necessary steps to end my marriage by mailing divorce papers to Miley. The process of finalizing the divorce took months, during which time Noah and my other friends stood by me, offering their support. Unfortunately, my greedy father-in-law attempted to manipulate and extort money from me. However, I was fortunate enough to possess irrefutable evidence of his daughter's infidelity, which ultimately worked in my favor. Despite Miley's persistent pleas for another chance, acknowledging her affairs and expressing remorse, I remained resolute in my decision. While she attempted to shift the blame onto her father, assuming that by doing so, I would easily forgive her. I recognized that accepting responsibility for her actions was crucial for true growth, while I had initially given her opportunities due to her entitled behavior stemming from her upbringing. The betrayal caused by her infidelity was a breach of trust that I couldn't overlook. However, I found it challenging to forgive infidelity, as I firmly believe that it is a conscious choice. Miley, being a grown woman, was well aware of the implications of her actions and must take responsibility for them. It became evident that Miley's relationship with her parents was strained, largely due to the stark contrast between the affluent lifestyle she had become accustomed to with me and the dynamics of her upbringing. Despite Miley's persistent attempts to contact me, I have firmly decided against any possibility of reconciliation. I have found happiness in my life, having started a relationship with Noah's sister, and I am genuinely content with the way things are. Sometimes, being alone is far better than being surrounded by individuals who exhibit greed and entitlement. The presence of such people can be incompatible with one's own values and can disrupt any sense of harmony or coexistence. Thank you for listening to the story to the end, and if you like it, please support us with a like, as well as subscribe to our channel. Write in the comments what you think about the story. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more jaw-dropping stories.